Okay, so in this video we are going to assemble a teapot from the parts that I made in previous videos. So as a reminder, you saw me make the body of the teapot, throw the body, and then trim the bottom on a jig. You saw me make the lid of this teapot off the hump and then trim it seated in the teapot before I trim the body, and then add a knob onto it. You saw me throw a spout off the hump, and you saw me pull a handle for it. So we're going to attach all these things together. We're going to set the lid aside so it doesn't fall out and get damaged while we're moving the teapot around. Now, as we will have talked about by the time you watch this in class, there's a lot of different styles of spouts. There's a lot of different styles of handles. You should be doing research to look at different teapots, different makers, and what they do. Some people choose to have very big bulbous spouts and bulbous handles. Some people go for minimal, for small. There's the Korean style handle that looks a lot like another spout that comes out this way. There are so many options for what we're doing. So just remember to think about what you want, do your research, and don't just do the first thing that you see, because there might be something really awesome that you haven't seen yet. So before I attach my spout, I want to do a little cleanup on the inside of the spout. I want to make sure that inside here is nice and smooth so that the tea is less likely to bump and move in its path, so that it comes out smoothly. I also want to make sure that my outlet right at the edge is nice and crisp, nice and straight, that there isn't anything jagged or rough about it. I kind of can ascribe to the theory of it being a nice sharp angle so that it can cut the water tension so that you get less drippage. Different people have different thoughts on this. That's the one that I like the best. So we're just cleaning that up, getting a nice sharp edge. When I'm happy with that, I'm going to turn my attention to attaching this. Now, we don't attach spouts just coming straight out, right? That doesn't look good. And also, it wouldn't hold much tea because you can only fill it as high as the spout. So really, when we attach lids, we're doing it at an angle. So when we make spouts, we know that we're going to cut off a part of this. We're going to cut it off at an angle. So I need to think about, what angle do I want? How much do I want to cut this? I made sure that my spout had this little belly at the bottom, because that means when I cut it, it's going to end up with this cute little flare at the bottom, but not at the top. So it's going to be like a little spout, a little person. And I want to make sure I'm cutting it evenly. We try to cut these as best we can. I would usually use an X-Acto knife for that, but I'm trying to just stick to the tools that I know that you'll have access to in your toolkits. So I'm using a fettling knife, but definitely an X-Acto knife would be great for this. So I just cut my spout, and you can see it's got this pretty extreme angle right now. And I want to think about, how is that going to fit around the curve of my pot? And do I want it to sit above? I think I want it to be level with the top of the pot. So I want to kind of position it here. I'm going to mark where I'm holding it, just so I can reference it back, so I'm not chasing my tail with this thing, because I need to shape out this cut a little bit more, because you can see that there's a curve that it's not meeting. So I need to take away some material here to accommodate for that curve. I don't want to take away too much all at once, just take away a little bit at a time. And I'm going to test it against my form here. That looks a lot better. I need to think about the bottom. Let's see if you can see it here. The bottom of this and how it's going to meet it. Some people choose to leave it be a little bit away, like obviously it needs to be attached completely, but they'll kind of make it so that it's obvious it's an attached piece. Other people will try to work it in. I kind of like it when it's still its own piece, but it's cleanly done. So we're going to trim that so that it looks nice and curved. So I'm going to trim this down a little bit more. And try to make it nice and even. And test it against here. And kind of curve that in. I think that's looking pretty good. And kind of shape it here. And trim it if I need to. Alright, I'm pretty happy with that curve. I'm going to mark all the way around this so I know where to put it back. Okay, so I need to make an outlet for my tea. And you can see I have my my mark that I've made all around. Usually I would use hole punches to do this because I don't want to make it so I'm pushing a lot of crud into the teapot. Again though, since I'm trying to use this with just tools you have in your toolkit, with the exception of some plastic ribs that you can borrow, we're going to use the fettling knife and we're going to twist it like it's a drill bit, and we're going to make some holes. Now we make holes, small holes, instead of just cutting the whole thing out, because we want to slow the tea down. You don't want it to all come rushing out at once. So I'm going to make 3 of these holes, I think. And again, this isn't the ideal tool for this because it's leaving a lot of extra clay. I'm going to have to clean up on the inside and the outside. But since we're dealing with unprecedented times, it's okay. I'm going to cut away this extra clay. And just sort of round out the edges of these holes to make sure I don't have any sharp little bits of clay. On the inside, there's definitely clay that got pushed in there, and you won't be able to see it. But what I'm going to do is I'll wait until this, since I can reach in here pretty easily, I'm going to wait until this gets closer to dry, and then I'm going to remove that carefully with a tool, because right now it's just going to smear and it's not going to help me really at all to deal with that. So I've got my holes drilled, and maybe I'll do one more. I'll do one right here. Okay, so now I need to slip and score my spout on. So I want to be very careful with the scoring. I don't want to get super messy with this or get the score marks outside of the line, because then I'm going to have to clean all that up. It's going to get a little bit messy, but we're trying to keep this as clean as possible so I'm not changing the texture of my piece by having to clean it up. Now if you're choosing to work your spout in really well so it looks like it's flowing off of the pot, you will end up doing that because you're going to have to work the pieces together. You'll have to add probably some extra clay around, like a coil. Just remember that any clay that you add, like a coil around the thing to spread out, any area you spread it to needs to be scored. If I were to smear a bunch of clay out to try to work it together, it would just make this big old crack around the area that I smeared. It wouldn't be attached very well and it wouldn't look good. So always, like, you would need to score out all over here to work that together. That's just not what I'm choosing to do with this one, but you can if that's what you would like to do. Okay, so I'm going to set this on here and make sure it gets lined up to where it's supposed to be. And then I'm going to press down gently so I'm not deforming the spout. This is kind of a nice place to press down if you apply equal pressure to the end of the spout to try to get it nice and seated in there. And get that kind of squoosh out around the whole thing so that you know it's attached. Okay, so I've got my spout attached and I need to clean up that edge. So again, one of the few tools that isn't in your kit that's sitting in the cabinet for communal use is are these rubber tipped tools, which are really great for cleaning up slip around a joint. So you could grab one of these and sanitize it and use it and then put it back. Make sure you sanitize it when you're done. And some of this, obviously, you'll have to wait on cleanup depending on the firmness of the connection. But I've got it mostly clean. I've got my spout now attached. So now I want to think about attaching my handle. So I've got my handle that I made. It's a more traditional Western style handle for a teapot. You certainly could go the route of the Korean style handle where it's like a backward spout that's on the side. So it's kind of sits attached to the side rather than attached to the back. And always just keeping in mind the size of your handle needs to be appropriate for the weight and size of your teapot. This is not a very large teapot, so I don't need a very big handle. This should be plenty. I'm going to cut off the two ends of my handle and start thinking about how I want to use this, because it's still soft enough, it's leather hard, so I can kind of open it up to see if I would like how I want the curve to be. I think this is bigger than it needs to be, so I'm going to take off more of the end here. So we're starting to get a little curve going. Your handle can definitely have an attitude, the way it's positioned, the way it's curved. I kind of like that. It's like a little ear almost. And what I really want to make sure is that my handle is lined up to be opposite my spout, because if it's off, it's going to be super funny to pour. So I want to make sure that's in a line. So I have that lined up, and so I'm going to mark this so I can get it back into place. Going to mark around the base, and I'm pretty happy with the angle it's coming at. I had cut the bottom at an angle, knowing the angle of my pot, so that's looking pretty good. So I don't have to do a whole lot of adjustments there. So I'm going to take this off now, and I'll slip and score those two areas. Again, we don't want to go crazy with the slipping and scoring here because we don't want to have to clean up a bunch of mess. And I'll slip and score the ends of the handle. And then we're going to attach this. I usually attach one side, give it a little wiggle, make sure it's set on there. Hit the other side, give it a little wiggle. I'm pressing hard enough to attach it, but not enough to deform the handle. Alright, so those are nice and attached. Again, I'll take my rubber tipped tool and just clean up that extra slip that's squished out. So again, if you're making a handle that you want to seem like it's flowing out of the form, you'll have an extra step of working it together. So there you go. So the handle is now attached to the piece, and my lid is finished. I'm going to clean up. So I had a little bit of deformation at this top when I was setting it upside down to dry. So I just want to kind of take some time, do your cleanup, make sure things are nice and tight. Go back as things are starting to dry to clean up your connection points if there's a little bit of gridleys or soft stuff that you just couldn't clean properly. Here's my lid. I have a steam hole in there. I'm not sure if you can see it. There's a hole in there that I cleaned up both sides of it, and we'll set that in there. And once I have everything glazed, it'll have a little bit tighter of a seat, but you don't want it so tight that that it's not going to fit back in there, right? So you need a little bit of leeway to make sure everything's good. So there is my teapot with my spout and my handle on there with my lid attached. So pretty classic little Mrs. Potts shape.